Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Big Money Stylist podcast. Right before we started this, I go, Ani, I'm sorry if I smell like Bengay. She's like, what is Bengay? It's not actually called Bengay.
Icy hot.
Icy hot.
I think it used to be called Bengay.
It's not, I know, and it's not, I feel like such an old man when I say that. I'm like, I got my joints are sore, and I had to put on some of my icy, no, it's actually.
For a second, I thought you said, I got my joint. I'm like, oh, you're talking that. We're doing that. Is that this podcast?
My body is like so sore, and I was like, oh, and I was like, it was like so sore to the point it was like I was just tired, and I was like, kept drinking caffeine today, and I was like, I need to stop drinking caffeine. So I forgot I had this. I put this minty stuff on. And I'm like, woo, I'm back. So anyway.
So in case you don't know, Danielle is officially 1 week out from her second fitness competition.
Yeah,
and your girl is loopy.
I am. So like the last week, they start cutting carbs, and like when you're used to eating like 5 servings of carbs a day, and like chicken and rice and. I had no carbs yesterday. It was just meat and veggies.
Do you find that your temperament is different this time of year?
I was telling Garrett, I was like, I was telling my trainer too, I'm like, I feel like high. I've only been high once, but, and it was a bad experience, so I shouldn't reference it to that. I feel like it's like my body's really fatigued, but my mind actually feels pretty sharp, if that makes sense. Like I'm kind of like loopy because my body's like, why are you doing this to me? Like it's crazy. But it's only like that. It's only the hard, I'd say, like the last 10 days. Like the last 10 days are like, but you're so close.
That's
like,
why your trainer, I just did her hair yesterday. And when I told you we were laughing, it wasn't like, haha, stupid Danielle. We were just laughing. And I was like, yeah, man. I was like, Danielle's kind of losing it some days. Some days I'm like, you good? And she goes, well, she only gave me 4 weeks. I was like, yeah.
I did. I was, okay. So I did a show last year and I was like, mad because the whole year we literally could only train with bands. Like I didn't even have like weights. And so I felt like I didn't get my body to the place I wanted to. And then they kept closing shows. Finally went open. My family didn't even get to go back in and see it. Like I had to wear a mask on stage. Like it was just so I feel like I was like, I want to do one more and I might do another, but for right now, I'm like, I'm good. I'm done. And my goal was just to like put on a little more muscle because I had a gym. Now there's gym and weights and all that. And put on a little more muscle, like be better with my routine and have my family there. So I finally found one. I was like, oh, there's one in Anaheim. Let's do it. And she's like, are you kidding me? And she's like, we can't do this in 4 weeks. I'm like, Val, we can do it in 4 weeks. But I'm not looking to be, I was at one point, I was like, I'm going to be a professional. I'm going to be a professional bodybuilder.
That's a lot.
And now I'm like, no, I don't want to be, I like it to give me a goal, but I was like, we can do this. I've stayed lean enough the whole year and I've put on muscle. Like we don't need... we got this. So we basically bikini prepped in 4 weeks.
She, I think, loves you and hates you for it.
Thanks, Val.
But I mean, hey, she's very good at what she does.
Yeah.
Like I'll give her mad props. She's good.
Yeah. And she'll look at me and be like, you don't get carbs today. I'm like, damn it. Or she'll look at me and be like, did you have a drink last night? I'm like, fuck. Or she'll look at me and be like, how was your diet? Are you getting enough food in? Like she literally looks at me and she's like, did you get all your food? And I'm like, no, and I can't lie to her. I look her straight in the face, and I'm like, I can't lie to you. So, I'm a bad liar.
No,
anyway.
But yeah, that's, I think, a good trait to have is being a bad liar. Because I swear when people are like, I'm such a great liar, I'm like, do you think that makes you sound good? Because you sound like a dick.
I like tell people I'm lying as I'm like that. I'll like say something I'm like, that's a lie. Like immediately after I'm like, that's a lie.
How about the last podcast? Because we were spicy on that one.
I was spicy.
Someone commented and they go, nice language, ladies. And I don't know what tone they meant it in.
No, they meant it in a dick
I
tone.
looked at it and I started to comment, I know, right? Fuck it. And then I was like, fuck you. Who cares?
I know. Sometimes, it's so funny. I even went to dinner this last week with a bunch of my church girlfriends and the pastor's wife. And I don't know what it is. I start getting like passionate about something and I go, I'm like reeling in the language with the ladies at the church group, right?
Well, yeah, it's the church group.
Yeah. And all of a sudden I find myself being like, yeah, like fuck them. And I'm like, we were like talking about church and God. And I was like, I was like, not.
Excuse me, Satan came through for a moment.
I started laughing and they were like, they looked at me and I was like, I'm sorry. Sometimes when I get really passionate, like it just like comes out and they're like, it's fine. And then at the same sentence, I also got a couple amens. So, I was saying something, right?
Oh no.
I was just real heated and passionate, but sometimes our podcasts are a little spicy. So if you're offended by the F word, I am not going to apologize, but
look,
maybe don't listen.
Here is how I view profanity, and let's just be clear on this. We are not cursing at you. Mm-mm. We are cursing to you, which is a difference. When, like, if I'm talking to Danielle, for example, and I'm getting loud, because I'll say naturally I'm louder than most people, and I know that.
You're
I'm
a
not
tiny, loud human.
I just feel like I project.
You do, yeah.
And I don't know how or why, I just do. But I'm not yelling at you. I'm yelling to you. I'm telling you a
walk
story.
heavy. Like, if you heard you coming down the hall,
Son
you
of
would think
a
there was like a linebacker coming down. Then you're like, oh, it's just Ani.
Oh my God. Do you know, I've heard that my whole life. My dad would go, why are you stomping? I'm like, I'm not, I'm walking.
You just have a very like serious walk. Like, you're getting shit done. Like,
well, so at this point, I just say, look, there's a big personality in this body. Of course, my footsteps are going to be heavy. What do you want from me? But that's what I think with profanity. A lot of people take it as like, how dare you say that at me? I'm not. I'm saying it to you because we're having a conversation. If I come up to you and I'm like, you're a bitch, then okay, now there's a problem. But I feel like maybe that's why I'm not really offended by a lot, because I just honestly, I choose to not be.
I think too, like, I was raised very Mormon, and we didn't, I mean, obviously we didn't swear a lot. And so when we did hear the swear words, or when we would swear, our parents were like, I'm going to wash your mouth out with soap. And it became like so jarring, like, oh no. And so I get it. Like, if you're listening to somebody and all you hear is the F word, because all you're focusing on is the F word, right?
Yeah.
So I think and so I get it. Like, some people are like, with Garrett's stuff, they'd even be like, hey, can you like tone it down? And he's like, this is just me. Like, if you can only focus on that, like, then go listen to a church podcast. Like, I don't care. But then, like, even he's like, okay, there's times where like I can use it as power, and there's times that I can like hold it back. So it's just a word. But I think a lot of people are triggered by it, and then they miss the message, sadly, just because of their paying attention to the
Well, then my question is it the intent behind the word? Like, is the definition of the word what's offensive, or is it the intent that's meant behind it? And I actually I read a book once, and it was a fiction book, weirdly enough, but they had this conversation in there, and they were like, well, the person was basically like, well, I know what you mean by it, and that's not nice. And they were like, okay, let's use the word butterfly. What if every time I said, well, butterfly you, I meant fuck you? Butterfly's not an offensive word. Right. And the whole book, this character was like, oh yeah, well, it's a good looking butterflying car. And they were like, wait, do I yet? Wait a minute. So then ever since I read that book, I was like, that's a good point. Is it the intent behind the word that's the problem?
Or the word?
Or is it just the word itself?
I think it's got to be the word itself. Like, we associate it with like
something very bad.
So then it triggers people like, oh, like how dare you? I can't like, what, oh my God, you're so mad. And you're like, well.
My favorite word's a C word, but I don't say it because it's very offensive.
Same. And Garrett knows.
I love it.
I do too. Garrett knows when I'm real mad. I'm like, she's a little... But you know, like in
UF&C,
like in like other places though, like they're like they throw that word around like it's
in
no
Australia,
big deal.
man.
Yeah, I was like,
I've seen people call their moms a C word, like jokingly, not from this country, and the moms just laugh it off because it's like saying, "Oh, you're crazy, bitch."
Yeah, totally. Right?
I love it.
Right, and that's why you can't say the C word, but you can be like, "Yeah, she's a bitch."
You know what's so funny? I rarely even call people a bitch. I don't know why it is. I don't.
I actually don't either. I
generally I'm like, what a dick.
Yeah, I would say my favorite swear words are fuck and shit. Those would be my favorites.
It depends if someone like scares me, it'll be a slur of bad words.
If someone scares me, I'm like,
it's MFSC. Yeah, it's a bunch of words.
Anyway, so all right, let's move on with today's topic. And
so we've been getting, I feel like, quite some messages actually about this topic, because I feel like the past few weeks we've really been talking about like how to stay in your lane and focus on yourself and really put out the side noise. And we got two different kinds of messages. One of them was, what happens when the noise is you?
Yeah.
When it's not like coming from other people.
It's from you.
Yeah.
And you know what? 90% of the time it is. I remember too, like, I think we make up stories in our mind because we're like, well, what if I leave the church? Or what if I leave this friend group? Or what if I leave this? What are they going to think of me? They're definitely going to go shh. So we make up stories and assumptions. And that person they'd be like, oh, cool, I got my own shit to deal with, right? Mm-hmm. People are so busy that they're very few people are actually thinking about you. Does that make sense?
What about, because I think what this girl had meant, or at least people had meant, is more like if you're about to do something and you're the one who's like, oh, you're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be good enough. Oh my gosh, you're crazy. That's never going to work. Like, what happens when that's the voice in your head? Because I feel like that happens to a lot of artists, especially when they're or anyone, even like entrepreneurs, or when you're starting a new hobby. It's always but what if blank?
Well, I'll just share a quick story then. So when I first started my brand, I didn't even know what a brand was. Like Garrett's like, you should start a brand. And like social media was not big. Instagram was not around. YouTube had just got going. Like there wasn't any of these like self-proclaimed like brand. Like, I mean, you had like the Kardashians, right? Like, but you didn't like, nobody like created a brand. I was like, babe, I'm not like Redken. I'm not like Paul Mitchell. Like how do I create a brand? I'm like, you want me to just be like a self-proclaimed educator that says like, hey, I created this system? I'm like, nobody's doing that. Like, nobody's doing that. And he's like, well, but I was in such a painful place that I was like, I can sit in this painful place of like, what if that's not going to work? Negative Nancy, whatever. But like nothing was changing and I wasn't happy in the space that I was at. So that's how I was able to move past that is you're not happy here. So what do you have to lose? And it's not like you're going to just like, do something and you're just going to get instant success or you're going to get instant failure, right? You don't really know which direction it's going to go.
Yeah.
And so sometimes when those thoughts come in my mind, I literally, and they still do to this day, you know, I literally have to be like, shut it off. And I'll say that to myself. I'll be like, shut it off. Don't spiral. Don't let your thoughts and emotions spiral and go. And I think that's why I've learned to be a quick start personality.
Yeah.
Because if I overthink it, I always get in my own way.
Well, and I think especially, I know that I think it's very easy to go, what if this goes wrong? What if I can't do this? What if I'm not good enough? And everybody has those thoughts. Like no one is immune to that. Like Danielle just said, she has them. And so do I, especially because the things we do here, they push you so far out of your comfort zone. The first time we're doing a convention with 350 people, I was like, bleh, bleh, like vomit. Yeah. I was ready to throw up. And the whole time I was like, oh my God, you're not ready for this. You can't do this. And for me, I know the way I turn it around is I literally go to complete opposite. Instead of saying like, you are gonna mess this up. You're not good enough. You've never done this. Like, you can't be as good as, because for me it was Garrett. Like, you're not gonna be as good as Garrett, which like, yeah, I'll never be him and I don't strive to be him now, you know? But I took it to the opposite of, but what if you crush it?
Yeah.
But what if this forces you to be like a part of like the best version you could ever be?
Entertain the best outcome instead of the worst.
Yeah. That's why I go to complete opposite. And I know we've said it before. There have been times where like I go into things with like a false ego of you're gonna crush it. You can totally do this. Because I feel like it's almost like if I don't allow myself the space to think best outcome, best scenario possible,
then you're gonna spiral.
It's easy to go back. And the minute you're in your head of who am I to do this? I don't think that I can. Then that's what starts like knocking you back and knocking you back.
You know what is, for me, I hate when I feel like controlled with something. So like I have pretty bad anxiety, but I hate that it allows me to control it. And instead of being like, oh, well, I probably should go, I don't take anything for it, but I know kind of like, after I'm dealing with it for my whole life, I kind of know what works for me. So that's why I work out a lot. That's why I work. That's why I do what I do to create the formula in the situation that I do. But I think it's hard because I don't go. You go to the side where you're like, what if I make it? And I go to the side of just kind of, I don't know, like just staying busy and not allowing those feelings to let me spiral. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I just feel like I've had to learn to reel myself in because even like, for example, like we just had a really big meeting and inside of it, we're like, okay, we're going to do this. Ani, you're in charge of this. And I'm like, okay. And even sitting there for a moment, my head was like, oh my God, this is so much. Holy shit. I have to have this done by Wednesday. And immediately I'm like, what do I have to do between now and Wednesday? I have an event. I have 2 trainings. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have another meeting on Sunday with my trainers who are flying in. I'm like, all of a sudden I'm like, there is not a lot of time. I do not let myself sit in the place of like,
does it bug you when like, so like for me, like if somebody's like, you can't do this, part of me is like I get anxiety, but then I'm like, I hate that I'm scared of this, or I feel like I can't do it. So I want to tackle it because I'm feeling that way.
Well, that wasn't how I was feeling today. Like, yes, I'll address that in a second. But even today, instead of being like, I don't allow myself to spiral when it's a lot.
Yeah.
I literally almost take a step back and be like, okay.
What's the first step?
It's really not as bad as you think. You have to create this and you have to finish this project. And then I start going, which one has a bigger deadline? What can I start literally just knocking out? And I focus on one thing.
Right.
Because I feel a lot of people allow themselves going,
well, and like, think about like something that you're scared of. Like, I know you were like terrified of the water and surfing. And there's this kind of like level of like, you know, the person you're going to become on the other side of doing it, right? And getting over your fear. So there's that healthy balance of having that like, ooh, what if, I don't know if I can do this, to kind of like to drive you to overcome that. But how do you get from not like literally like sucking you down, like you're never gonna surf, honey, like you're never gonna be able to do it, like do you get excited where you're like, okay, I want to tackle this head on, like, because I get now when I have a challenge, I'm almost like excited to tackle it. You know what I mean?
I love challenges, and I think to myself, to me, it's always a simple question. If I don't do this thing now, am I going to be pissed at myself 6 months or a year from now because I didn't start?
Right.
And if the answer is yes, I'm going to be so mad at myself. And that's what happened come January when I was like, because for me, the reason it started is, yes, I'm afraid of the ocean, but I'm like, this sucks. I could walk to the ocean from my house. I live so close to it. And I've been here for 3 years, and every year, all the time, I see the surfers, I see the skateboarders, I see the bodyboarders.
Don't you think people do that in life though? Like,
Absolutely.
Like, I should do this, whether it's business, personal, like whatever it is.
But then I think the self-doubt creeps in, and they're like, meh, fuck it. Maybe another time, maybe. So for me, I sat there and I was really like, do you want another summer to go by where you make excuses about not getting in the water because you're scared? I was like, no, I don't. And then I thought, okay, it's January. Come summer, are you going to be so pissed off at yourself for still being afraid of the ocean because you didn't try? Yes, I am. And then I'm like, what's the worst?
Yeah, what's the worst?
What is the worst? The worst, I was like, well, for me, the worst, I was like, well, I could drown. I'm like, is my coach going to let that happen? No. Are the lifeguards going to let that happen? No. Is that probably actually a possibility? Probably not. A shark could eat me. All right, that's a little fucking dramatic. Is that actually going to happen? No, it isn't. So when I started really being like, is that actually the worst thing?
What about time? Like, people will always say, like, I just don't have time. And I always feel like that's kind of an excuse, too. I'm like, I feel like we are some of the busiest women on the planet. And like kids, husband, work, businesses, like running it all, like the time is just kind of like an excuse. Like to say you don't have time is because you have to do hard shit that you don't want to do. And it's because of those stories you tell yourself. It's because of those voices. It's because of, that negativity that you pour into yourself. But like, honestly, like the only thing I can tell people is like, we have students all the time that come to our classes and they're like, I found about you guys about 7 years ago. I'm like, wow. So you sat in this place of like, whatever it was, like, I don't have time. I self-doubt. I'm not going to do this. This method is stupid. Like whatever. You sat in that space for 7 years. I'm like,
because they know it's going to require change. And I think humans in general, it's easier to stay in a painful place where you know
it's more comfortable.
But it's because you know exactly what's going to happen, even though the thing that is going to happen is a thing you don't want anymore. Like you're literally like, I hate this plate of food. I could make a new plate of food, but it may taste good. It may not taste good. So I'm just going to eat the shit that's on my plate now.
Why are we taught that predictability and safety is the key to happiness? I hate
because it was taught to us by people who were scared.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's got to be like back in like just generations of like even how my parents were raised and Garrett's parents, like this scarcity mindset of how their parents were raised and whatever. So it was like, don't do anything outside of the box. Like it's never gonna pan out. You know what I mean?
Because it's a what if it fails and you lose everything? What if I succeed and I gain everything?
And I think there's more people kind of like I shouldn't say that. I'm sure there's an equal that. I shouldn't say that at all. There's an equal side of scarcity people and people that are like, just go for it,
There's always two sides to a coin.
I feel like though we are like people that say like we want to give people permission. So when artists come, it's almost like, hey, we're going to give you permission to succeed and stop doubting yourself.
You want an example?
Yeah.
We're going to call her Sally because I don't want to use her real name. Okay. But there was an artist, Sally.
I thought you said salad.
You hungry, girl? You good? But Sally is who we'll call her. She's one of our Academy students, and she just posted literally just a few days ago in the network, and she was like, oh my God, guys, how many times is too many times to raise your prices? I'm so stressed out. I've already done 3 price increases, but they weren't enough. I'm still not charging enough.
You're like, I'm trying to find out where the problem is. You're complaining about having to keep making price increases?
Well, and I'm listening to this, and I'm looking at this, and I literally just like took a deep breath, and I was like, I want to tell her the answer, but instead I asked her this. I said, okay, I go, here's what I'm experiencing. You are so scared of doing a price increase that you're doing like mini price increases so that it's not like a price increase. I go, why? And she was like, I already know you're right. And she goes, here's why. She goes, I don't think that I should be charging more than people who've been doing hair longer than me. I don't know what they're going to say. And it was this whole big thing. And I was like, totally. I go, I hear you. I go, I have another question for you. Are these people that have been doing hair longer than you, are they as experienced in extension as you are? Yeah. I go, are they putting in the same amount of work that you are? Are they going through the same amount of education? Are they doing the exact same things that you are? And she goes,
She's like, I don't know.
No,
probably not.
No, she straight up goes, hell no, they're not. She's like, no.
Yeah.
And I go, okay. I go,
Then
if
you have more experience, not time behind the chair, and experience trumps.
And I told her, I go, okay, so you're not doing the same thing. You're not doing the same services. You don't have the same experience. You're not practicing the same. I go, so why do you think you have to charge less than what you're worth?
Yeah.
Because they aren't doing what you're doing.
But you know what? I also hate it when and I've been doing hair for a minute now, like, and consistently, because there's a lot of hairdressers that are like, I've been doing hair for 30 years. I'm like, but like actively, because I've been actively doing hair for 20 years. I'm like, I stopped when my kids, when I had a baby for like 3 months, and that's it with each kid, and I have 3 kids. I'm like, so I've actively been doing hair. Like, because you do one client a month, like, you do not have the experience that I have when you do one client a month and you took 6 years off in between your 30-year gap of having a license. You haven't been doing hair for 30 years. You've been carrying a license for 30 years. So let's be clear about your expertise and where you're at and own it. And so that's why I feel like, yeah, it's a good conversation to have with her, where it's like, stop comparing yourself to people who are not at the same level in their expertise or in their craft.
Well, and that's why all I did was ask her like 4 questions. By the end, she was like, oh my God, you're right. I have to do a price increase. She's like, just so you know, this was a few days ago today. She was like, hey, Ani, just so you know, I already have my email drafted up. I'm doing a massive price increase. I'm really excited. I'm nervous. I think I'm going to throw up. I feel a little bit sick. And I'm like, you're fine. Another girl commented, man. And sometimes when people like remind me of the things I say, I'm like, I did say that. No. And one of the students, Alita, she goes, well, I'll never forget what Ani said to me when I was standing in front of her crying. And I was like, I have too many clients. I don't see my kids. And she goes, I did. I looked her deadpan in the face and I said, okay, I go, so from here on out, whenever you have a client that wants you to come in early, that you say you'll come in early, that you say you'll stay late, you'll take it on a day off, I need you to go up to your 3 children and tell them that you don't care enough about them because the client is more important, so you're going to go spend your time off with your clients. And she was like, she's like, I can't do that.
She was like, dagger.
And she's like, I can't do that. I'm like, well, then I suggest you start telling your clients no, because you're telling someone no. So you're going to look your fucking kids in the face and tell them, no, mommy doesn't care enough about you. I'm going to go do hair. Or are you going to tell your clients, no, I'm going to go spend time with my children?
I will say, the moment I had kids, I was way less like, yeah, I'll come in whenever, I'll do whatever, I'll work whenever. I was like, no, sorry, like I'm only working these days. And people would ask all the time, well, can you come in on a Saturday? Well, I did work Saturdays for a while, but they would always try to bend the rules, right? And then before you know it, I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'll stay later. Okay, I'll do this. And clients are all, it's like, how do you expect your clients to follow your rules if you don't even follow your own rules?
That's what I was telling that first artist. I'm like, you're going to just resent your clients. You're going to be pissed at your clients for not paying you what you're worth, but you aren't charging what you're worth.
Right.
So instead of doing 16 mini increases where then you look like an asshole because you're increasing the price of your appointment.
If somebody did that to me, I'd be like, this is weird. What's going on?
That's why I'm like, just do one massive price increase. If people drop off, great. That's actually what you want because you're working too much.
Yeah, and it's actually less stressful. You're like, anytime you make a price increase, it's because you don't have any room on your books. And you have to make room for people that are paying you for your value. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's one of the craziest conversations. Artists are always so scared. Like, how do I raise my prices? What do I tell them? I don't know. What if they're going to hate me? I don't know.
They might.
You can see them every class. They like spiral. And I'm like, you know what? I'm like, I remember there was one girl that was even like, no, can you give me like a script? Like exactly. And I go, you don't need a script. Like when you go to check out, just say, hey, next time if you'd like to be on my books, these are my new prices. If this doesn't work for you, no problem. I'm happy to refer you to another artist. And then walk away and let them sit in their thoughts for a minute.
Well, and it was like, so funny because we told her what to say and we're like, repeat it. And she goes, okay.
She couldn't do it.
She goes, hi, Danielle. I'm so sorry. I'm like, stop. She's like, why are you apologizing?
She's like,
But it's just so interesting. So I feel like these conversations keep coming up, but all of that at the end is really you doubting yourself in one way or another, and no one's exempt to that. I'm sure, Danielle, before you went on stage, you were like, "This is fucking nuts! What the? I'm about to strut in my tiny nothings, with a lot of people looking borderline at your butthole. Like
it's true.
I've seen your bikini. It's tiny, girl. It's very little.
I know. Part of me is like, why am I doing this again?
But like that's the thing that happens. But you just have to, it's a lot of mental strength. I will say that, just like you have to exercise your body to have that strength. This is not something that's going to happen overnight because you think about it once. This is something that I personally have been practicing this for years. And it's like a daily thing because even today, like I said at a team meeting, I was like, this is too much. I don't think I can do this. I don't have enough time. And I was like, wait. Calm down. hold on,
Well, I think
you're overthinking
your
it.
capacity increases because you've gone through moments where you've pushed yourself to where you're like, I don't think I can do this. And then you do it and you're like, okay.
I
And
could
it's
do
not,
that.
yeah. And then it's not like if that situation doesn't arise again, it's not like you're like, oh, I remember how much work that was before. Like you remember, like, okay, I've created shit like this before and it was a lot of work. Can I do it? Yes, I know I can. So you just have to start with where you're at and not try to start like 10 steps ahead and then be like, get overwhelmed and be like, like literally I always tell people like, start with where you're at. Like,
And you have to remember that what is your ceiling now? So your ceiling, meaning the highest of your capacity, the best person that you can be, with time and practice and effort, your ceiling becomes your new floor. Meaning the best person you thought you could be at one point will actually be the worst person you could be. Like, and that's how it works, because the more you build and the more you grow. And go to, guys, right now, so you can see my hand movements, go to dkwstyling.com. But if this is the best person you thought you could be, eventually you grow to be that person. And then you're like, oh, this is actually down here. Turns out I can actually be this person now. And then you keep growing. So your ceiling becomes your floor if you keep trying, if you keep practicing, if you push past all those really shitty, difficult times.
And I have to say this too, and it's kind of funny, but before I started my brand, I kind of had like an ego where I was like, I'm already there, like, right? And then when I would go to do stuff like speak on stage or train, I was like, my hands are trembling, I'm sweating, and I'm like, oh shit, like I thought I was really good. Turns out I'm not there. You know what I mean? So you kind of have to have this moment of you're like, it's scary because you think you're like, oh, I'm totally that good. I've been doing hair for like 10, 15 years. Like I'm set. I'm good, right? And then you have to be willing to be like, okay, I'm gonna like let go of the ego a little bit. Like you have to start somewhere. Like you're not gonna be an expert overnight, which means like even my like going back to my bikini show, like I did good. But like when I watch my video from last year, I'm like, oh, my posing wasn't that great. You know what I mean? But I didn't know any different. And I was like, I did great. And now like my posing is increased. My body looks a little bit different. And I'm like, okay. And so I was so proud of that person when I first did that. And now I feel like because I was like being really hard on myself the other day. I'm like, I'm not going to do this. This is stupid. I haven't improved this year. Like nothing's different. And then I did a video and my trainer makes me record it. And I watched it and I was like, okay, my body looks different and my routine looks better. Do I look like a professional yet? No. But do I see progress? Yes. So I think it's important to really note the progress that you're having and accept the place and where you're at in order to grow.
Man, I've done that. I've seen myself on videos so many times.
Right.
Do you know that I still have part of the video of the first training I ever did for you guys?
Did you think you were awesome or crappy? Like when you in the moment, how did you feel? Were you like, I'm nailing it?
I'm split. In the moment, I was like, okay,
good.
you remembered more content than you thought.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, I'm like, were you auctioning something off? I'm a marketer, I'm a closer. Like, I'm like, why were you basically like speed talking? What happened? But I also know I do everything quick in life, I've come to realize. So of course I'm going to like talk fast when I'm nervous. But in the moment I was like, okay, well, you stood in front of 7 cameras and you did it. And that's something you didn't ever even expect yourself to be able to do. So kudos, you did it.
Yeah, give yourself props, but then give yourself feedback on like,
I always tell myself like, okay, what are you proud that you accomplished? You know what? I'm really proud. I got up here. I did it. You did it. Sometimes like literally just doing it regardless of the outcome is like, at least I did it. Yay me. Right. And then I'm like, what can be better? I'm like, okay, this could be better.
Right.
And so I feel like, but that helps. And even like you said, being on stage, so scary.
Yeah.
Especially when there's hundreds of people who are just like,
Eyeballs.
They're watching you every move. You're on a screen that is bigger than the building itself. Like it's terrifying. Yeah. But I always go into it and remember like, okay, you're on this stage for a reason.
Right.
You've practiced. You know what you're talking about, not because you read it in a book, but because I lived it.
Yeah.
I fucking lived. I lived this shit.
Right.
So you know what? And then I tell myself, I'm like, who better than someone who lived it?
Well, and people always trust somebody who's authentic and they've lived it, just like you said, right? You can always tell when somebody's trying to give you advice and you're like, but did you experience that? Okay, well, you read some books and thought
that would be like me being like, let me tell you how to raise a kid. I don't have kids. Yeah. Let me help you through childbirth. Ma'am.
Wait, no.
No.
I like that was one of the things that we've been focusing on too. Like, be careful with who you take advice from. Honestly, like if you have a voice in your ear, ask them like, are they trying to accomplish what you're accomplishing? Do they have your same goals? Like, you guys, you have to get out of your own way. And a lot of times those whispers and stuff, they might just be you. So I know we're coming up to the end of this podcast, but final thoughts, Ani.
Final thoughts is Guys, this is a mental exercise. You will not accomplish this. You will not overcome it every night. But with practice, just like everything else, there will come a day that a negative thought pops into your head and it will be easy for you to be like, you know what? No, I don't need that. This is actually what I'm going to be doing. But that it only comes through practice.
Right. And I would say my final thought is like, don't let your emotions, your anxiety, whatever it is, be power over you. Like, honestly, like I hate when I feel like something's controlling me, whether it's like a negative thought or my anxiety or this. I'm like, I get so irritated. I'm like, no, fuck that. I'm not letting that control me. I'm not giving that feeling or that emotion. I'm not giving them my power. And I tell my daughter that all the time. She's like, this person's talking mean about me and this. And I'm like, so you're going to listen to them and give you your power? Why don't you just like push that away, ignore it, and focus on you? So
I want to say 10 seconds about that. I was bullied really bad when I was younger, like the meanest things in the world. And something, because I would go home and cry all the time and be like, I don't understand what's happening. And one thing my mom would always sit down and she asked me one question. She goes, is what they're saying true? She would go, honestly, is what they are saying true? And I'm like, well, no, it's not true. She goes, then why does it matter what they think?
Yeah.
She's like, I know it sucks, but if what they're saying isn't true, that means they don't even know you. So you get to let it go.
That's true.
And they say, if it's not going to matter 5 years from now, don't spend 5 minutes worrying about it today.
I saw that quote on Instagram today, actually.
I think we might have seen it on the same person.
I was like, I knew who it was.
Yeah. And so that's a big, I feel like those things, because it happens. I feel like, I swear to God, sometimes adults are way worse bullies than children. I'm like, you're a fucking
They're like
adult.
undercutting bullies. Like,
You're an adult. Get your fucking life together. But even with that, I tell myself, I'm like, is what they're saying true? And if it's not, I'm like, you know what? Your opinion is now irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's invalid.
Yep.
You don't matter to me because you don't know me, so you don't get a fucking
maybe
opinion.
even ask yourself, like, are those stories you're telling yourself true? And if you're like kind of having like a moment where you're like, well, no, they're not, then let them go and move on.
Yeah. So guys, thanks for being here with us for the Big Money Stylist podcast.
Announcement. All of our small classes are sold out for the year.
Yeah.
So we do have open enrollment to the Academy. The Academy is a 1-year program on natural beaded rose and business marketing and sales, specifically designed for hairdressers. It's a virtual/event 1-year program. I'm like /event 1-year program. We do have open enrollment. It's application only. So if you guys want more information on that, please visit
nbr.education.
I was going to say it backwards. I'm for sure. So that's why I had to point it over to Ani. So go to nbr.education. You can find out more information on that. We do have some amazing, more virtual kind of trainings and stuff coming up before the end of the year. If you're like, oh no, I missed my window. No. We have more education. Just our small classes are currently sold out for the year.
So if you want to know about our future education and events that are coming up, go to nbr.education and put your email in there, and we will notify you when things become available. But for right now, all we have is the Academy, and that will pretty much be our focus moving forward.
Yeah.
So guys, thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.